Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm Amy Wren, the official reluctant Disney adult herself. It's Saturday, which means it's time for another FastCast. Last week, we talked about the food at Disney World, and since we alternate Disney Pictures and Disney Parks, it's time for another episode of Amy at the Movies. Today, we're going to talk about the last two films released by Walt Disney's Animation Studios, 2023's WISH and 2024's MOANA 2. I rewatched the former and watched the latter on Disney Plus recently and have a lot of thoughts about both of them. And since I've never done a review of either of them on here, I figured now's as good a time as any. But before we begin, let's get to the usual pre-show. Subscribing to the Reluctant Disney Adult is the best way to make sure you don't miss a single one of our FastCasts, our fun shorts, and all of the great videos that are coming soon. If you've already subscribed, we thank you. If not, you know what to do. And don't forget to visit the Great Amy Ride, the official Patreon of the Reluctant Disney Adult. Paid members will get a whole lot of cool perks, like exclusive posts about movies and almost all things Disney, backstage passes to see how the videos get made, and a special invitation to our Discord, where you get to hang out with me, the Reluctant Disney Adult, and also Cora, the Reluctant Disney Wife. Go to patreon.com/thegreatamyride to never miss a thing. Now that that's out of the way, sit back in your seat, munch on your popcorn, and relax as the lights go down, the projector rolls, and we talk about WISH and MOANA 2. Okay, if you're just joining us, we are talking about WISH and MOANA 2, the last two movies that Walt Disney Animation Studios has produced to date here at the time of our recording in 2025. And before we get into the movies, I think I want to talk a little bit about the different eras of Disney animation. And they kind of correspond with decades, although there is some play with that, especially early on. Of course, there's the golden age of Disney, which really only lasts from 1937 to when Bambi came out, which I think was 1942 or 43, somewhere around there. Because I don't really consider the movies throughout the rest of the 40s, which are all package films, due to, a combination of things of World War II and some financial constraints that were put on Disney by the Bank of America, basically saying that they could not make feature films for a good while if they wanted to, get a loan. Because, outside of Snow White, which made a lot of money, and Dumbo, which was profitable in large part, not only was it popular, but it also, was cheaper than the other ones to make. Pinocchio, Fantasia, and Bambi really didn't do that well at the box office. So Disney had some financial issues that were further compounded by, World War II starting. So that golden age really only lasts through Bambi. I don't think anyone's going to say that Saludos Amigos or Three Caballeros or, those package films in the late, the other package films in the late 40s, except for maybe the Legend of, the one with Ichabod Crane and Mr. Toad, which was kind of a preface for what would happen in the 50s. But those package films range from honestly really good, like the aforementioned one about the Legend of Sleepy Hollow and The Wind in the Willows, which was Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. The ride is based off of. And some of them were good, some of them were not. But eventually, of course, starting in 1950, what could be deemed, Disney's Silver Age began. And I think that really goes from Cinderella through Alice in Wonderland and Peter Pan, Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, and through 101 Dalmatians and Sword in the Stone and Jungle Book. And that's where you get this kind of demarcation, because that's really the last movie that they produced that, Walt Disney had any real association with, was Jungle Book. Animated movie, of course. And that begins kind of a dark ages that goes from the Aristocats through Robin Hood and the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh, The Rescuers, and The Fox and the Hound. And then there's kind of a subgroup that's kind of in that Dark Ages group, but the 80s is kind of its own thing, because except for The Fox and the Hound, the rest of the movies are released under the new management of Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg. So they're kind of this like interregnum where if you watch them, you notice that a lot of the animation feels closer to what you would get in the Disney Renaissance era rather than what you would have gotten in the 70s, but they're still not there in terms of the highest quality. Not saying several of these movies in the 70s are movies I actually like, and especially The Great Mouse Detective in the 80s is a particular movie that I enjoy. If you check out the rankings I did a couple years ago, that kind of bears out there. But they're definitely not really in the same arena as the Disney Renaissance. With Little Mermaid, that was the first. The Little Mermaid was the first movie that really goes into the Disney Renaissance era, even though it's kind of sitting in that. There's a lot of similarities more in terms of its animation to the work in the 80s, which makes sense because it was a 1989 film, than, say, even Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King. Yes, The Rescuers Down Under is in there as too. It's always forgotten because it's not one of, the big four movies, even though it's right in the middle of that group. And of course, those are the big four: Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. That, was the Disney Renaissance. And then, of course, the back half of the Renaissance are the movies that have some great stuff going. Some of them are genuinely good movies, but they also they're not as universally viewed as great movies as, say, the big four are. And of course, that's like Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Hercules, Mulan, and Tarzan. And then, of course, we get to kind of a second Dark Ages, the early 2000s, which again have movies like Emperor's New Groove and Lilo and Stitch that are genuinely or generally liked or even loved. But you also have stuff like Dinosaur and the kind of forgotten Fantasia 2000 and Treasure Planet, Atlantis. And then you reach the nadir, the true nadir of Disney animation with Chicken Run and Home on the Range. And then, of course, Chicken Run Dinosaur kind of starts the animated, computer animated, CG and the Pixar style. There have been computer animated elements all the way back to at least Great Mouse Detective, and definitely some big CG set pieces, 3D animated elements with in the big fight at the end with Ursula. Of course, Beauty and the Beast has its own set of CG, but Dinosaur kind of represents the first step into full CG animation to a certain degree. But Chicken Run is really not Chicken Run. Chicken Run is a much better movie. Chicken Little. I was calling it Chicken Run. That apologies to Chicken Run. Chicken Little is the movie that I was talking about. And also in that group it's kind of the transition to the computer animated is Meet the Robinsons, which is an underrated movie for the most part, and Bolt, which is a perfectly fine film. It's better than Chicken Little, that's for sure. And that's kind of a transition zone to, like, 5-6 years ago, I would have said the current era of Disney animation. It starts with The Princess and the Frog, which is, it's not the last. The last was Winnie the Pooh, but The Princess and the Frog was the last big 2D traditional animation movie that Disney did. They went back to it in part because of the whole shakeup that happened after Disney bought Pixar once Bob Iger took over, and John Lasseter kind of came in and basically took over Disney's animation as well as Pixar. And they made that big traditional movie, and it was good. And then they made Winnie the Pooh, and then they've not made a traditional movie, 2D animated movie, since Winnie the Pooh, which is a damn shame. I don't like that Disney Animation is not doing 2D traditional animation. But that was the era we were in. We were in this full-blown CG era after Winnie the Pooh. And of course we had Tangled, which was in there as well, which was kind of like the start of this whole generation of movies after it, which was excellent. It's some of the best work that they've done in the 3D animation. It was kind of, I believe, a hybrid of like some 2D backgrounds with 3D animated characters, I think was going on. I don't remember that entirely. I'm sure if someone has a better grasp just off the top of their head than I do, and if so, please scream that, talk about that in the comments. And then the CG era, like, they made Wreck-It Ralph and Frozen and Zootopia, Moana. All of these movies, to one degree or other, go from being perfectly fine, if, muddled, like, kind of in their story and what they're trying to say with Zootopia, but to, being great movies like Moana and Wreck-It Ralph, which is one of my favorites from this era. And again, if I were talking about all of those movies, Big Hero 6, of course, is in there as well. If I were talking about movies up through Ralph Breaks the Internet, which is not a good movie. It's not a bad movie per se, but it's not as good as Wreck-It Ralph and some of the other movies that preceded it. Or even Frozen 2, I would say that we were still in the same era as Tangled and Frozen and Moana. But I think it's pretty clear as we've gone on that we have kind of entered a new era. And I would be hard pressed to say that Ralph Breaks the Internet is in that era. And I would be kind of hard pressed even to say that Frozen 2 was in that era. But we're in kind of this era where things have kind of shifted. They kind of progressed even farther. And I think those two kind of presage where it's going. Because before those two movies, Disney really had not done a lot of sequels. before Ralph Breaks the Internet and Frozen 2, there was Rescuers Down Under, which was a sequel. There was Winnie the Pooh, which is not really a sequel of the Many Adventures of Winnie the Pooh. It's just another kind of, Winnie the Pooh movie where, even though I think this wasn't really creating like a framing device to connect existing Winnie the Pooh shorts, it's still set up in that similar way. And of course, Fantasia and Fantasia 2000, which aren't really sequels. That's a second edition of Fantasia kind of deal. And so Disney has not done a lot of sequels, which is not something you could have said for, Pixar's third movie was a sequel. And again, I'm not against sequels in general, because Toy Story 2 is legitimately one of the best movies that Pixar has ever made. Sequels don't necessarily have to be bad things. But Disney had not done a lot of sequels. And starting with Ralph Breaks the Internet, they've now done 3? Have they done just 3 sequels so far that have come out? Because you have Ralph Breaks the Internet, you have Frozen 2, and you have Moana 2. And of course, we're going to be getting several more. Like, we've got the Zootopia sequel coming out. We've got another Frozen sequel coming out. And that kind of feels like we're in that era. And I think you could make a solid argument that Strange World and Encanto and Raya and the Last Dragon, all 3 of those kind of fit with the old era, but we're kind of transitioning to what I think Wish and Moana 2 are firmly in a new era of Disney animation, for better or worse. And that's my long way of getting around to the present, or the 2023 at least, to talk about Wish and Moana 2. So we're going to take a bit of a break here. But when I come back, we're going to get into talking about Wish. So stick around. Okay, folks, welcome back to our FastCast on Wish and Moana 2. So we were talking a bit about the different eras of Disney animation and how I think that we're currently in the earlier days, not the earliest, but the earlier days of a new era of Disney animation. And now we're going to finally get to actually talking about 2023's Wish. So Wish was an animated film directed by Chris Buck and Fawn Vera Sunthorn. And it was written by Jennifer Lee and Allison Moore from a story conceived by Lee, Buck, Vera Sunthorn, and Moore. And the score was by Dave Metzger, and the songs were by Julia Michaels and Benjamin Rice. So, Wish was the last Disney animated movie that I've seen in a theater. I first saw Moana 2 on Disney Plus, but I had not rewatched Wish since I watched it in the theater. And at the time that I had watched Wish in the theater, I didn't hate the film. There are things about the film that honestly are compelling and that I enjoy, but I don't know if I would say that I really like the film all that much. And we'll get into it a bit more. But basically the story is there's this young woman named Asha, who is voiced by Ariana DeBose. And she's kind of she's looking to be this apprentice wish keeper or something like that to the King Magnifico, who is voiced by Chris Pine. Who he and his wife, Amaya, Queen Amaya, voiced by Angelique Cabral, they kind of rule this country. I don't remember the name of it. Rosas or something like that. And anyway, basically he keeps when people turn 18, they make this wish that they don't even know out loud what that wish is, and it's given over to King Magnifico to kind of keep protected all these wishes. And then, I don't know, every so often, I don't know if it's every year or if it can happen multiple times a year, the kingdom will hold a ceremony where one person will get their wish granted. And this has been going on for a long time. I guess, I'm not entirely certain about how all this works together, because Asha's grandfather, Sabino, who was voiced by Victor Garber, he has been holding on to this wish, and he's 100 years old, and he's never had his wish granted. Asha's mother, Sakina, she's been around a while. She hasn't had her wish granted. In a subversion, kind of, or flipping the script of how Disney has had a tendency to have killed off the mother, Asha's father is no longer alive. So I don't know what the deal is with that. But anyway, she's kind of slated to be the king's wish keeper, but then she questions why he has to hold on to the wishes instead of giving the wishes to everybody. And there, it's not like we see where the king is going completely, but we definitely see that was the wrong answer for her, because he does not give her the job, and he makes sure that in the ceremony that neither her grandfather or her mother get their wish granted. Not that I think it was necessarily that he was going to pick them, but he goes out of his way to show Asha that they will not get their wish granted. So yeah, he's not quite gone supervillain yet or villain yet, but he is kind of an ass. Anyway, that's when we meet Asha's friends, who there's Dahlia, played by Jennifer Kumiyama. There's Gabo, played by Harvey Guillon. There's Hal, played by Nico Vargas. There's Simon, he's Sleepy Simon, played by Evan Peters. There's Bazima, played by Della Saba. There's Safi, played by Rami Youssef. And there's Dario, played by John Rudnitsky. If you notice those names, you notice what they all start with. You notice how they have a certain similarity. And if you described their character makeup, they're basically the Seven Dwarfs. Spoilers if you haven't seen it, but her 7 friends are the Seven Dwarfs, at least in terms of personality. So Doc, Grumpy, Happy, Sleepy, Bashful, Sneezy, and Dopey. And this creates some of the more annoying parts. There's a part where Dario, after Star, we'll get into the Star in a bit, shows up. He does the Dopey ear wiggle, which I yelled something that we're kind of a PG channel here. So I yelled something that I would not repeat. Basically, let's say, forget you, when that happened, because it was stupid. It's stupid. I don't like it. I don't really like that they're the seven dwarfs. It's doesn't really work for me, but that's that. So Asha like feels hurt at being rejected by the king, and she goes and makes a big wish of her own out in the open, and then that like makes a star appear, like this little animated star that doesn't really speak, but he kind of floats around and causes crazy stuff to happen, including making Asha's goat Valentino suddenly speak and, have the voice of Alan Tudyk. And he's kind of comic relief throughout the movie. He's got some funny lines, I'm not going to lie, but also whatever. The star showing up, like, really scares King Magnifico. Who King Magnifico, there's a whole thing where, like, the country where he used to live, like, things fall apart and he flees that country and founds Rosas somewhere in the Mediterranean. Like, it's basically said that this exists on Earth. I don't know if it's an alternate Earth, whatever. I don't think it's something you need to think too hard about. But he founds this country, and now he thinks everything's falling apart again. So that's why he decides to use dark magic or whatever to stop this star. And that's when he finds out that if he destroys wishes, he gets more magical power. And he goes from this guy who's just kind of overprotective and limiting his subjects' ability to pursue their dreams to being actively destroying their dreams. It's obviously got some overtones that I think point at, I'm not going to point fingers, but at current events, I'm going to point fingers. It's 100% pointing towards authoritarians like Donald Trump. But just authoritarianism in general. There's a whole scene where they sing a song and they're basically going to declare a revolution against the king. There's a whole showdown, which ultimately the king gets defeated, and he kind of gets sent to like a nether region and suggests that he becomes the magic mirror of Snow White. And then, Asha turns out that she has a cloak that looks an awful lot like the fairy godmother's cloak from Cinderella. There's a whole bunch of stuff where basically the character of Peter Pan is given the ability to fly. There's reference, like it's supposed to be like this kind of love letter to Disney Animation. They've got references all over the place to a whole bunch of different movies, and not just the great movies. I'm pretty certain there's a Home on the Range reference in there. Just a bunch of different stuff. They're small. They range from subtle references to like obvious references. And it sounds like I don't like the movie, but I think it works. I think it works pretty well at times. Like, I am compelled by the story, the moving forward. I don't think the story is that bad. I don't think Magnifico is that bad of a character even. I do think the music is terrible, except for the song that Chris Pine's character sings, that Magnifico sings. That's kind of his villain moment, that he's going from being just this kind of somewhat sympathetic character, even though he's kind of an antagonist of Asha from nearly the beginning, to being an outright villain. And that song is the only one that really felt like a song. The rest felt like they were trying to go for like a musical where every lyric, every word is sung. And these were just exposition parts that don't really work as individual songs. They're just connectors to get you to the songs, is how they felt. And they don't like, that is the only one. This is the Thanks I Get, I think is the title. is the only one that I can even remember the title, and I'm not even entirely certain that's correct. But it's the only one that I kind of remember the title of, and I can kind of remember the tune, which compared to, like, say, Moana or Encanto, just to pick two relatively recent ones, or even Frozen 2, all of those have songs that right off the bat, when I hear the title of the movies, I can think of multiple songs from those movies. And this one doesn't have that. It doesn't, those songs don't work. The Disney references range from cute, they're perfectly fine, to annoying crap like the dopey ears, which just, I don't know, it just annoys me. It's weird that Sleepy is kind of picked as this character who's going to betray everyone because he wanted his dream to be a knight, and then he gets possessed by Magnifico, and it's not really a story where there's any arc for the Sleepy character. He just makes a wish and betrays them. And it's not like he learns anything. He's taken over by Magnifico. It honestly would be more compelling if, like, he actually chose to be on Magnifico's side and, like, go after them. But that would also mean he'd have to face consequences when Magnifico gets caught. And I guess they didn't want to, like, punish the Sleepy analog in the movie. But I don't know. At one point, they were planning to do it traditionally. And Jennifer Lee, I think, was doing an interview and was kind of like saying that, no, it turned out that we could find out how to express ourselves creatively and still use kind of this 3D CG animation, but kind of give it a sheen to make it look like Golden Age Disney animation, which it doesn't really. What it makes it look like is kind of crappy animation at times. Like, I kind of dug the style, but at the same time, it doesn't kind of work. And it was pretty clear that they absolutely, the animators, the people who, do the work, wanted to do it traditionally because of course they do. They want to make 2D traditional Disney animation. But the bean counters clearly said, nah, we're not going to do it because it would cost more than the CG. So they came up with this, like, half-ass compromise. And it just doesn't work. And I kind of appreciate that they kind of went for something a little different than just replicating the same style that's been done since Tangled, more or less. But it just didn't work. But again, like, the movie still kind of works for me, at least from a story standpoint. And maybe it's just because here in 2025, and we're looking for any kind of hope, any kind of pushback against all the bullshit that is going on. Maybe it's just my tolerance for a story that kind of pushes back on some of that crap has heightened. But I don't know. It's a good movie to some extent, but it's not a movie that I really like per se. It's kind of a middling movie. I would say that it's like, I don't do star rankings anywhere. It's not the worst movie Disney's ever put out. That is absolutely Home on the Range and Chicken Little. That 1-2 punch was nasty and it's bad. It's not even a bad movie. It's just a middling movie. And that's too bad. Coming off of Strange World, which is also another movie that I don't hate, but I don't like all that much. And following it, Moana 2, which after we take a bit of a break here, we will get into. So stick around. All right, folks, welcome back to our FastCast on Wish and Moana 2. So on the previous segment, we were talking about the 2023 film Wish. Now we're going to move on to talk about the 2024 movie Moana 2. And so Moana 2 was directed by David Derrick Jr., Jason Hand, and Dana Ledoux Miller. The screenplay was written by Jared Bush and Dana Ledoux Miller, and the story was by Bush, Ledoux Miller, and Beck Smith. The music was by Mark Mancina and Opataya Foai, and additional songs were done by Abigail Barlow and Emily Bear. So, of course, Moana 2 is a sequel to 2016's Moana, which was a great film. It was the last Musker and Clements film before they retired from Disney. And this film originally was not going to be a theatrically released film. It was going to be a limited series on Disney Plus. I think it's supposed to be about 5 episodes. So I think they had already gotten the scripts written for the season when Bob Iger and company came to the showrunners, the writers, and said, okay, this isn't going to be a show. This is going to be a animated movie, a feature film. So they took the scripts that they had written and pared it down to a feature film that I think is somewhere between 90 and 120 minutes. And it feels like it. I don't hate this movie necessarily, but I don't like it as much as I like Wish. And of course, as you already know from that review, I'm not that sold on Wish. This really feels like somebody took a hatchet to a TV script, a series of TV scripts, and made a movie out of it. Like, it just feels bare bones in its construction. A whole lot of stuff that would have explained, I think, what characters were doing and the things that they were doing, like solving problems, just kind of gets solved off screen. Like, there's a whole part where Maui, of course, played by Dwayne Johnson, and Moana, played by Oli'i Carvalho, who they're talking and they're having a conversation off screen. And then they go back and they say, well, we better get working on this boat. And the crew that Maui picked up, which they have a whole scene where Loto, played by Rose Mateo, and Kele, played by David Fane, and Moni, who's like this Maui fanboy, is played by Hualalai Chung. I'm sorry if I butchered those names. And there's this crew, and you got the kind of shy boy who's of course the Maui fan, and he's but he's kind of strong. He's kind of supposed to be the brawn of the group, and Loto is supposed to be this kind of brainy weirdo. And Kayla is supposed to be the grumpy farmer that they brought along for some reason. I guess so that he could help keep them fed. I don't know why he was along, other than they need a grumpy old fart to be part of the gang. And that all feels like, this is a TV show, so we got to have a crew. Besides Pua the pig and Hey the rock gobbling rooster, who of course is voiced by Alan Tudyk, the John Rassenberger of Disney Animation. And like, they're supposed to, this crew is supposed to be like, while Maui and Moana are having this conversation, the crew is they just fix the boat. You're not shown any of the team building. You're not shown any of the process. They just fixed it off screen. And there's a whole bunch of that stuff where it feels like, oh, the solution happens or it just happens. There's no process to it. No action being taken. It just kind of happens. And it just doesn't work. Another thing that doesn't work is the music. And I don't know if it's because Lin-Manuel Miranda wasn't there and the people making the songs, it's not the music per se. I think the music of it works fine for the most part. I don't have any problems with the score or any of the music behind the songs, but the lyrics are just forgettable. They have the same problem in a lot of ways that Wish's songs do. Other than the fact that there's not even a "This is the thanks I get" in Moana 2. And it kind of feels like the lyrics they're trying to do Lin-Manuel Miranda, except for the fact they can't do Lin-Manuel Miranda because doing what Lin-Manuel Miranda does successfully takes more effort than just trying to do it the best you can. And it doesn't work. The songs are just not good, which stinks because Moana has good songs, has memorable songs. And it just feels like they were kind of put together haphazardly. It just does not work. And there's a whole thing where Moana's sister shows up. And again, we don't have a whole lot of time for development of these characters because they were all developed. There's the scripts in that. The characters were developed with the TV show in mind. So they were going to have more time to maybe breathe and develop the characters. But I don't know. She exists because someone said we need a younger kid because, this is 3 years after the events of Moana. So Moana is definitely not a teenager. She's maybe a teenager, but she's towards the higher end. She's a full-fledged adult in this movie. So I think there was an idea that you kind of needed a younger character. I don't know why Simia exists, other than maybe she just would exist. She doesn't have a lot to do other than being just this little character that beyond Moana's parents, she leaves behind. I guess they did that because, Tala is dead, even though she does show up and has a scene with Moana. Of course, Tala is voiced by Rachel House, and Simia is voiced by Khaleesi Lambert Suda. And I don't know why they exist, but and beyond those characters, Tui and Sina, Moana's father and Moana's mother, played by Tamara Morrison and Nicole Scherzinger, respectively. And there's a new character who's this legendary wayfinder, Tautai Vasa, played by Gerald Ramsey. That kind of rounds out the cast. There's also Matangi, who is the enforcer, a bat-controlling enforcer of the god that they're going up against. Played by Ahime Fraser. And that character doesn't get a whole lot of development. So she doesn't really she has a scene with she has there's kind of a interplay between her and Maui that is fine. She has a scene with Moana and plays a role in getting Moana to think in a different way to solve problems. And there's just not a lot of meat to the movie. Like, there's a whole story where she has to find this sunken island, that Moana and her crew have to find this sunken island and raise it, because without it, the different islands of Polynesian people can't find each other And I guess the idea is that if they can't find each other, then they're just going to all interbreed out, and their societies are going to die off. And I guess, I don't know really. And it's just, there's not a lot of build. There's not a lot of, again, problem solving, which is kind of not how it worked in the original one. And I think it worked better. Oh, and then there's a whole thing with the little coconut people. They show up again, and then part of the crew, is they find one in the lair of Matangi, who got stuck there. And so this little coconut person is part of the crew. And so they kind of do things, I guess, but they don't really do a whole lot. Like, it's just, a movie that exists because Disney realized Disney Plus was not going to be this end-all be-all where they were going to produce a bunch of crap and release it, and everyone was going to really eat it up. So they very quickly decided, okay, we need a animated film to slot in here. And I don't know. Did not look at the box office. I'm sorry. Maybe it did fine. Maybe it was a good decision business-wise. Because creative-wise, it's not. It just doesn't work. And I don't even know if the show would have worked. Because it would have had some of these issues. But again, it would have been more fleshed out. We would have had more development, I'm pretty certain, of the crew. We would have had more development maybe with Moana's family. We would have had more development with Matangi and that interplay with Maui. And more time also to sit with the fact that, again, big spoiler alert, that Moana dies. And it's kind of a Disney death, but she comes back and she's a demigod like Maui now, but I don't know what that means really for Moana. Like, is she still part of her, like, community? Or is she like a demigod that's going to be out on her own doing crap like Maui does? And I don't think it's really made clear. I think it's just they couldn't figure out a way to bring her back to life without it making her a demigod, I guess. And then, of course, the movie ends with a post-credit scene where usually the Disney post-credit scenes are, like, the animated post-credit scenes are like little notes of funniness related to characters. Sometimes side characters like Marshmallow in the Frozen movies. And I'm just thinking Monsters University, which of course is Pixar, not Walt Disney Animated. But has the slug character finally showing up in the classroom after the session has ended for the year. No, this one is kind of an MCU type cliffhanger that's setting up the next Moana, I guess, or if it's setting up maybe they actually will do a show or whatever, and it's like the god that was thwarted and the island was raised. Again, there's not a whole lot to it beyond Maui tries to raise the island but fails. Moana touches the island and dies and becomes a demigod, and then things happen, and then the island is raised. the god isn't defeated or, like reformed or whatever. He's still around. Matangi is still working for him to some degree or another. And then the crab, Jermaine Clement crab shows up and has a whole scene. So they're going to all team up, I guess, to take on Maui and Moana in Moana 3 coming whenever it comes to theaters and or Disney Plus or whatever. Again, I sound very negative about this, and there are things I don't like. I don't like this movie as much as I liked Wish, and I don't really like Wish that much. But I don't hate this movie like in a visceral way, like I hate Chicken Little or Home on the Range. And I don't find it boring and bad like I do, say, Dinosaur. But it just feels so unambitious. It feels like Bob Iger and company are trying to play it super safe and not trying to do anything like, again, sequels in and of themselves don't feel like they're inherently bad. They can be good. They can take the story to another level, a new place. The Toy Story movies are a good example of sequels being good. Cars 3 is an example that I like to point to, how they salvaged that franchise after Cars 2 was a decrepit mess of garbage. Frozen 2 tried to go places, although they hedged their bets and backed away from the most interesting idea, which is Arendelle getting destroyed by, Anna choosing to break the dam, which would have been really interesting if they had to move on from Arendelle, but they didn't, because you got to sell the world of Arendelle, the world of Frozen, at Hong Kong and Paris and wherever it's going to be built. I don't want to destroy that town. And again, I think that's why we're kind of in a new era. The next movie is going to be another sequel, Zootopia 2. And there is supposed to be a movie in 2026 that may be an original movie. But 2027 is Frozen 3. And we've just kind of entered this era where the pandemic is kind of to blame, I think, but Strange World bombed. Encanto was more popular, but it never really had like a big theatrical presence because that was 2021. Raya and the Last Dragon, I don't think had much theatrical juice and is honestly kind of forgotten. Like, I almost forgot that it existed just talking about movies here, which is a perfectly fine film. That's not against the film. It just kind of exists in that nether region of 2020, and that's not the film's fault, really. So they're probably feeling gun shy because there's been some big busts, and not only even super reliable Pixar has had its share of busts, and so we've kind of entered an era where I think they're not going to take all that many big swings. Now, that could always change once Bob Iger's gone and whoever replaces him might give a bigger, might do a bigger job. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen if it's Josh D'Amaro who replaces Bob Iger. I don't know if that's still the smart money is that it's going to be Josh D'Amaro. I don't know. I don't really follow that closely. Although it would be interesting to see what effect it would be on the studios if the theme parks, and yeah, I know Bob Chapek came technically from the theme parks, but Bob Chapek was a merchandise guy, which is why he kind of sucked as the theme park head. And also the CEO. You probably don't want a merchandise person to be in charge of a film studio / theme park company. They're going to treat it in a way that is not super creative. But Bob Iger is certainly playing it really safe these days too. And honestly, that's been the case since, John Lasseter left because he's a creep. So I don't know. I don't think that Zootopia 2 is going to be like some great return to form. The trailer did not promise a lot to me. I mean, it looks fine animation-wise, but it looks like they're going back to the well. You know how we solved racism in the first one? Well, here's a new, different type of racism as we introduce snakes and how they weren't even allowed in the city, let alone, allowed in the city, but there were, complications and complexities. So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. And I don't know what will go on with Frozen 3. I don't know if there's any creative reason to have a Frozen 3. I don't know what it's going to be like. We will just have to see. But yeah, I feel a lot more confident there's going to be cool stuff over the next few years in the theme parks than I do about Walt Disney Animated Studios and Pixar, for that matter, who is also seems like they're getting deep into sequel mania. So yeah, not a super great time to be into Disney animation, I don't think. But anyway, that is the show, everyone. And that's all I have to say about Wish and Moana 2 and the state of Walt Disney Animation Studios here in 2025. Please remember to like this episode and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. And please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/The Great Amy Ride. As always, we thank you for watching and listening and making the reluctant Disney adults so great. Bye.